running them through some tests, giving them some work to turn back to you. You can have all the impressions that you think you have, and you can have all this confidence about what this person's going to be like. And you put work in front of them and it does not turn out the way that you thought it was going to turn out. And I often try to remind myself that you never really know how someone is going to do until you put actual work in their hands.
All right, Nate Hagerty here, founder of TaxProMarketer and Advisor Pro Marketer, with my co-founder, Troy Lakey, operated as COO for many, many years. And here we are recording this podcast here, the Pro Marketer podcast, and we're in a different seat than we were for so many years. And it's only because of what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about hiring today. We're talking about how you and your tax and accounting practice can hire to the point where I believe it should be your goal to be where we are now, which is that we are not operating anymore. And we are operating as a board of advisors for TaxProMarketer and Advisor Pro Marketer. And it has gone to the point where just 2 months ago, one of the first months that we had away from our operation role, we had the best month we've ever had. And things are continuing to grow and build without us. And we are now free to continue to pursue a variety of relationships within the tax and accounting industry. We're able to put our hands to a variety of different things. And we have 22 people here at TaxProMarketer who are serving tax and accounting pros and building like amazing success stories without us. Yeah. So do you have and I'm speaking to you, listener, do you have the aspiration to build beyond yourself? Because if you do, then what we're going to talk about today is going to make a big difference for you. It's not something that we invented, and I don't know that we have a lot of special sauce. We have a variety of things that I think might make a huge difference for you, because we've been in the place that I believe that many of you are. And here are the few places that I see a lot of our clients at TaxProMarketer and Advisor Pro Marketer at. There's a lot of folks that are stuck in the sole proprietor trap. And what I mean by that is they are so connected to their client work that they are not able to spend very much time thinking at the 10,000 foot level and focusing on the owner level tasks, because there's so much in the working directly with clients, whether it's creating engagements, talking to them, actually preparing taxes or working in the books, creating P&Ls and KPIs and all of the different end products that our clients work in. And you're stuck in this because you haven't yet moved to the stage where you're comfortable having other people play that role. Now, that's a significant number of our clients, and we want to talk to that. But then there's another group of our clients that are beginning that process, and they built a team, or they're in the process of building a team, and they've had some swings and misses, maybe a lot of hits, but they haven't yet built to the place where they're able to operate as kind of owners purely. Now, Troy and I made this transition actually after a process and after multiple years of having people already in the seats that we sat in for years. We didn't make this, decision on a whim or because we were bored. To the contrary, we made the decision to step out of the operating seat because we had people in leadership who were building and operating and working with our clients that if we didn't get out of the way, they would be frustrated. And so we have a CEO and two co-COOs, which speaks to, by the way, the level of contribution that Troy brought, because he needed 2 people to replace him. I only needed 1. But we had those folks operating very functionally within those roles for years before we actually dubbed them and stepped, when I say fully away, I mean just in the operation component, because we are still working kind of relationally and with our team, and even with some clients, we're still involved. But we no longer, the business, the practice, the agency doesn't actually need us to grow. Hence, again, our best month ever without us sitting in the seats that we used to sit in. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about hiring. So Troy, I've taken up all the oxygen in the beginning of this. as per my usual, what would else you say as we move into this conversation about hiring?
I guess one thing I think of from what you said is just it can be discouraging in those earlier seasons of growth. And in those earlier seasons of growth, as you're pointing out, could be decades, right? And it really depends on how you build, what you want, decisions you make at different stages of business. But if you're sort of the sole proprietorship that's been that way for decades and you're deciding, hey, I think I actually want to build something to a little more scale than what I've done, or whether you got started in the last couple of years or whatever, and you're getting used to what does it look like to try to hire people. I just think for us, when we started trying to hire people earlier on, it was hit or miss. We relied a lot upon listings that we would put out there, and people they would respond to them, and trying different tricks to weed through to find the right kind of person who's going to be the right kind of fit, and then mixed results, right? I mean, sometimes we would have somebody that we really thought was going to be a home run, wouldn't quite be a fit for what we needed. Other times, obviously, we would have somebody that would be amazing. And it takes a little time to hone your skills at finding the right kind of people. And not just that, but I think also you start getting more of those right kind of people that are the right fit, that do pass the test with you in there. They make the cut, you hire them, they stick because they work well for you and your culture and your company. And the more of those people you bring on, you start to develop this self-sustaining thing almost, where you've got quality people. And when you're looking for other people, they want to be a part of that. And so you can find better people that are a better fit, that would want to be a part of a team like what you've got and can see that they could fit into a team like that. And higher achievers, more driven, more motivated people can see your motivated team and want to be a part of that. And so you can attract the right kind of people. And then you've got those good people that you've already got who have friends that are like them that they can recommend when somebody's available. And so it becomes easier over time. So I guess the thing that sparks for me from what you say is just that, hey, don't get discouraged. If you feel like you've tried some hires and some have worked out and some haven't, and you're not sure how to feel about it, in our experience, that's normal. Over time, it improves.
Yep. My friend Josh Long, who is a consultant to billion-dollar corporations, put this together. And it's a very simple framework for understanding the hierarchy of business needs. Now, we're all maybe familiar with Maslow's hierarchies of needs from a personal standpoint, but this is a really compelling, very simplified understanding of the pathways towards business growth across different disciplines. And the first stage of a business is where a lot of people are still in figuring out how to get the bills paid and like creating a profitable enterprise. That's obviously the foundational level. Now, most of our clients, most of the people that are probably listening to this podcast are already at that stage and maybe beyond it and are moving into the next, which is building the right team. The right team in place, and that's the main subject of this, is what enables then the next stage, which is growth. And we hit the Inc. 5000 list. We've experienced seasons of great growth. A lot of that was because we found the right team. And then once you hit that growth stage, then you can get to the place where we're at now, where the business runs without you. And that is an incredible position to be in a business, because it enables you to, again, put different and higher effort into the business, if that's your goal, or like what Troy and I are doing, putting our hands to a variety of other business projects outside of this business while still kind of retaining our compensation and retaining kind of the value of what we've put into this business. Troy and I have been running together for almost 16 years now. It'll be 16 years, a couple months after we record this thing. And we've been through every stage in this process together. Troy was my very first significant hire in this business, and it might actually even be interesting to explore what that hiring process of you and me looked like, because it set the foundation for where we were going. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Again, I've verbally identified this. If you're just listening, the foundational stage is the bills paid. You got to get that stage handled. And then the right team, like that's the next stage of business growth. Then you can really grow together as a team, and then you can get to the place where the business runs without you. All right, I'm gonna stop that share so that we can talk. So when I hired Troy, I actually had a choice to make. I started this business and I already felt like I was at the stage where the bills were going to get paid. I started a marketing company, and I was very fortunate to have a mentor, Chauncey Hutter Jr. Some of you know him, some of you don't. regardless if you do or don't. He introduced me to hundreds of his clients who were in the tax industry and gave me speaking opportunities at his events. And I'd worked with him for some years, and he had encouraged me to start this company as a way to serve his coaching and his coaching clients. And I, from the beginning, knew that I had something that was needful in the marketplace, which was building a marketing engine that would help our clients build deeper relationships with their clients and their prospects in whatever form that took. And in the beginning, it was actually direct mail. We were not a digital marketing agency at the very, very beginning stages of this business. We quickly pivoted to that as the power of the digital space became more and more apparent. And frankly, some mistakes that we made in the kind of the direct mail world, which that's its own podcast we could talk about at some point, but where our passion really kind of evolved into was this digital marketing space. And so email marketing, websites, and SEO were a huge part of what we have been doing on behalf of tax and accounting professionals since 2008. Now, we started the company in 2007. I hired Troy in 2007, but quickly pivoted into the digital space. And so Troy and I together built a digital marketing service company for tax and accounting professionals. And so back to when I chose to hire Troy, I had a personal assistant, and that was it, and me. And I was gaining clients left and right because of the platform that Chauncey Hutter had given me. And so I knew that I needed like somebody to grow with me. And I had three candidates to choose from. I don't even remember the name of the guy that I ended up not hiring, but it was also James. You remember James, your friend Troy, and then this other guy who was kind of like another version of me, but younger, and then Troy. And what I saw in Troy, I realized later, my very fortunate kind of instinctual choice to hire him was that he would fill in gaps that I maybe didn't even realize at the time that I had, but I felt within my spirit the need for. And I was a visionary, I was a salesman, I was good at writing marketing copy, and I was a marketer, but I needed somebody with an operational kind of perspective and somebody who could make sure that every I was dotted and T crossed, and that I would actually fulfill upon all these big promises that I was making to our clients. And Troy came from a paralegal background, a ministry background, hadn't had specific experience within the marketing landscape, but had the mindset and the kind of the personality that I knew that I needed. And that would be like my first big lesson is understand your gaps when you make hiring, and understand, like, have some self-awareness about the kind of wiring that you bring to the table. Now, some of you, a lot of you maybe even within tax and accounting practitioners might actually be oriented like Troy, and the I's dotted, the T's crossed, analytically oriented. You are really good at digging into spreadsheets and creating SOPs and like doing the work. But you might need somebody who can push you and who can help you from a marketing standpoint, from a sales orientation, whatever it might be, vision standpoint. There's an awesome book that Troy and I actually haven't gone through together, but we've absorbed so many of the lessons of, called Traction, the Entrepreneur Operating System. And one of the key philosophical driving points of this, and again, it's agnostic across a variety of industries, is the role of the visionary and the integrator, and how those need to be at the top of scalable organizations. And both of them need to be well-founded. And the way that Troy and I fell into is I've been operating as a visionary, and Troy's operated as the integrator with plenty of crossover. I've definitely put my hands to a lot of SOP creation. He's definitely pushed me when it comes to vision, but our primary seats have been in those seats. So if you are a sole proprietor and you are looking for your first key hire, my recommendation is make sure that that person is the yin to your yang, and that you aren't just replicating yourself. Because if I had just hired another version of myself, then we would have probably burned out and crashed and burned as a company. But I was very fortunate to have found a person who's now become my best friend, outside of my wife, and is the person that could help me build something that now is 20 some odd people working here, and a culture of joy, and Inc. 5000. And we're at the place where we're no longer having to actually operate. That's where we've gotten after 15 years together.
And there are all sorts of types of personalities and gift sets and mentalities that form that team of 22 people or whatever. Mm-hmm. It can be kind of counterintuitive when you're feeling like, hey, I just wish I had more of myself. When you feel like you're wearing too many hats and man, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I'm good at the other, but I'm only one person. And if I want to take on more clients, I need more of me. And so it can be the intuitive seemingly move to try to find somebody that's a lot like you that can just be another you. But you actually most of the time don't want that. You don't want a bunch of clones of yourself, because then whatever gaps you have that you may not even be fully aware of, right? As Nate was saying, we're not even always fully aware of our own gaps, right? Sometimes it takes a while even for those to become clear to our own selves. But if you've just got a bunch of clones of yourself, like those gaps that you have, those things that you're not as good at, just probably aren't going to get done very well. And it's going to be hard to really scale at any kind of level as long as you're just kind of replicating yourself. So you actually want to look for people that are complementary to you, with some exceptions, like Nate said, maybe that you actually need somebody who can do the accounting work and has a similar personality very similar to yours. So you need to find somebody that is like you, but you're probably also going to need some other positions where people get excited to do work that you hate, that's a drudgery to you.
Yep. So that's like the foundational first piece of the hiring puzzle, is finding that complementary co-leader, really. Now, the way that's looked over the years is Troy started out as a part-time hourly employee and soon moved into salary and kind of full-time, and then soon thereafter into kind of partner level. And I had to get comfortable as an owner and as a leader to let him into some of the things that a lot of owners want to hold on to. It took me time. Troy will tell you, it probably took me longer than it should have to bring him into that seat. But as I did, the more I did, the more joy, the more better my life. I could hold on to my exclusive seat as owner and leader, or as I could learn to give it to Troy, the better my life got, and the better I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I know from long years of friendship, the better his life got, and the better, just the more vision we were able to have as a business and the stronger foundation to build to the next stage. And so that's, I think, where we should talk next. But Troy.
Yeah. And I just want to acknowledge that could be scary to talk like this. This was our journey. This is the way it worked for us in business. Obviously, no guarantee that the first person or three that you try to hire to be your integrator is going to be somebody that you would ever want to offer some sort of partnership to, right? That proved out over time with us, right? And so don't set your expectations, your hopes too high, nor be scared to hire somebody because you're afraid you'd have to give over too much to them. That isn't necessarily the case. That's how it went for us, and that can be a very good thing.
Yeah, it took time. It took years. And then finally, probably 8 or 9 years in is when we formalized the desire for that. And then a few years later after that, where we actually put pen to paper and got the thing actually legalized. So it did take time. And there was a lot of humility that Troy had to operate in, a lot of letting go that I had to learn to become comfortable with. And that was its own process. And that can be its own podcast in terms of letting go as an owner and learning to see things grow without you retaining full control and ownership, et cetera. That's its own interesting journey. But to the point related to hiring. So once you've got that kind of leadership team in place, whatever that looks like, then you're building for scale. Then you're building for operating, serving clients, and building an organization that can serve and fulfill on the promises that you make. Whatever that looks like, whether it's tax return preparation or a bunch of accounting clients, CAS, whatever resolution, just pure advisory work, whatever that kind of core service offering of your practice might be, you need to find operators and you need to find client care people, and there needs to be some overlap, especially in the beginning, of those two roles, client care and operations. They need to come probably in the beginning, grow together. People need to wear multiple hats in the earlier stages of growth. But then as you then do scale, you can get more and more specialization as you grow, which is where we're at now, where we have a team specifically oriented towards communicating and taking care of relationships with our clients. And then another team purely oriented towards execution and building and website building. For us, it's website building, SEO, pay-per-click advertising, email marketing delivery, and all the different services that we provide our clients. Now, again, that looks different for you and for various service professional industries. But what we're talking about really is the same playbook across a variety of service professional practices like ours.
Yeah. And Can I just add that I think early on when you're hiring, you want to be looking for people who can help you systematize, people who can help you think about scale early on. Like when they're doing this thing, and not just think about doing it that one time. Think about, how can I make this easier, done over and over again? If this is something that's going to have to be done again and again in any form, how can I make this as easy as possible, as automated as possible? Like, how can we create excellence without having to overthink it every time, or make it as least as possible manual? How can they systematize these things in a way that you actually can scale them, and you're not like hamstringing yourself by having to do things manually constantly, or reinventing the wheel every time something has to be done. So you want people who can think that way, especially early on. You need almost everybody to be a little bit like that. I mean, not everybody. Yeah. There are some people who are going to have some roles where that's not a fit, but you want, as much as possible, your early hires to be able to think like that as much as possible. As you get bigger and more specialized with your team, as Nate was describing, it can become more the role of one or two or three people, where they're mainly thinking along those lines of like, how do we make this scalable? How do we make this systematized? How do we make this more efficient? Not everybody needs to think that way, but early on, you do want to be looking for people that can think that way.
Yep. Now, so a lot of tax professionals and accountants, when they're looking to hire, and conversations I've had over the years with our clients, and I've been in the industry for 20 years now. It's wild. I've seen a lot of people fall into the trap of looking to hire like a senior level specialized person from the beginning, and looking to bring in somebody who carries a lot of the same skill sets or expands their skill set, et cetera. And there might be a place for that. And you might find like a particular unicorn that has a particular skill set that you don't have, that is just wanting to be a part of something that you're good at creating for them. And I definitely know practices where that's the case. But more often than not, a lot of times people are looking for this unicorn person who has all the skills that they have, as we alluded to, rather than looking for somebody that they can bring along and train along and have a long-term vision for. And so one of my first recommendations when you're at the scale kind of standpoint is hire for traits rather than skills. And that's a very important overall framework to think about when it comes to hiring. And we can drop the link to our Glassdoor rating here at TaxProMarketer. The reason I say that is we've created an environment here where we have lots of moving pieces and lots of different people playing lots of different roles. And for some reason, there's a lot of joy. And my supposition around that is that we have not brought in these big heavy hitters in these different areas, but we've actually found people who have great traits, and we've trained them in the skills necessary to serve our clients well. And we've focused on that as our overriding framework for how we scale this agency and how we scale our practice.
We've looked for the right kind of people that are going to jive well with our team and be a good fit for the culture, and be a hardworking person that's eager to learn and able to learn quickly. And if you've got those things in place, you can teach the skills.
And even in technical things.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I think, well, go on. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think a lot in our industry, tax and accounting world, like we're so bedazzled by certifications and experience that we forget the value of finding like that awesome work ethic young person, or waiter who serves us on a weekly basis at our favorite restaurant, or single mom who's looking to re-enter the workforce, or person who's wanting to make the leap from blue collar to white collar. Those kind of people can become like your best employees and best team members, because you're giving them an opportunity that's more valuable than just the pay that you're bringing. You're actually helping them create the kind of life that they want to have for their family, for their own selves, their own kind of like state of mind and self-image, what have you. You're helping them create something that they might not have if they didn't work with you. So that has been a huge part. Now, we happen to be in a church community. We happen to be in a spiritual community here in Kansas City that broader, we're like a lot of us are connected in various relational ways. We're not all at the same church at all, but there's a lot of people who are transitioning out of full-time ministry work in our world for whatever reason. It's just a weird kind of quirk of Kansas City. And we found a lot of people who are making that transition into kind of like out of full-time ministry and into working in what we call the marketplace, right? And so that has been an extremely rich source for us. But your local marketplace might have its own quirks, and it might just be like a blue collar to white collar transition. It might just be a mom who's finally putting her kids into school and has like 30 hours a week suddenly on her hands. Could be, you name it. Like if you're in LA, like frustrated actors, whatever it might be, there's a source within your world of talent who's ready to make a shift.
And their eagerness and often gratitude, like for the opportunity to make a way in this new career path, will drive them usually in a way that maybe somebody who has the certifications and has the resume may not be as driven, right? Like they might feel a little entitled, like they've already earned this. And of course they have the position that they have. And of course they'll get the respect that they deserve, so sometimes you deal with that stuff, right? Like there are things that can sometimes come with the training and experience and education and all that aren't actually always a total net positive, or at least there's drawbacks. You're still going to have time to spend time with that person, helping train them in the way you expect things to be done, according to your expectations, according to your culture, according to what matters to you. Maybe wherever they were working before or however they were educated is different from how you want it done. And so you actually have to spend some time on helping them to unlearn some things, kind of untrain them, detrain them. And so you're going to wind up spending time with people, helping acculturate them and helping to train them, regardless of where they're coming from, to some extent or another. Why not be training somebody who has a lot of drive, a lot of gratitude, a lot of eagerness to prove themselves, a lot of work ethic and desire to perform, and find that right person who's a fit for the kind of person you're looking for, and spend the time training them to do the technical things maybe. And honestly, it's an easier move financially, especially earlier on, than trying to find that person who expects a lot because they've already gotten the training.
Yeah. And so what that requires is having a mentality as an owner to always be in a recruitment mode and always be like looking for those diamonds in the rough that are there in your world. And that might be a stretch for some of you. It might not be for everybody, but it's something I've had to learn to lean into over the years. And, I'll give you an example. A lot of you know Christian Jones, our CEO now. And he is a great example of this because he was somebody that actually changed the culture of our business when we brought him in 8 or 9 years ago. And he was somebody in a career transition mode. He was a young guy when we hired him, and he had gotten his Series 7, was doing financial planning and was super sharp and amazing work ethic and had an entrepreneurial mind, but was looking for something fresh and different than what he had come from. He'd worked in this kind of grindy financial planning organization here locally in the Kansas City area. And the reason why he was available to us is just relational networks. I had made myself available as like a mentor to young guys who are in transition, and a mutual friend connected us for coffee, and he was getting ready to get married. Christian was getting ready to get married at the time and was like a little dissatisfied in his work. And we got together for coffee, talked for 90 minutes, connected. And then a need arose for us a few months later. And I was like, hey, Christian, should we have a conversation about you coming to work with us? And we worked it out. He came in part-time with us in the beginning, and then the rest is sort of history. He kind of jumped in really fast and hard and brought a lot of structure and built a lot of amazing things from the get-go, because he was very talented, had the right kind of, again, traits and work ethic of the kind of person that we would want to have and could scale with. And he's been an amazing friend, and he's become one of our best friends now, and is leading our company now. And same is true with Eugenia Brock and Ben Grootman, who came to us in career transition moments and didn't have the specific skills, with the exception of Ben, who actually did come in with some significant repositories of marketing knowledge, but was in a transition moment himself, and relational networks brought him to our attention. And Eugenia her husband was a friend of mine, and just all these different kind of relational networks, because I was in a recruitment mode as an owner, like when I was at church and when I was at cocktail parties and when I was in a variety of places within the community. I was always looking for these diamonds in the rough. And I encourage you to be always in that recruitment mode, looking for the kind of person that you want to build with. And then you find the right spot for them. And that sounds really airy and maybe too vague, but what ends up happening is that the need arises and God makes a way. I don't know, Troy.
Yeah, because we've had a lot more success with that than what we did in the earlier days that I described earlier, of, posting something to Craigslist at the time, right? Or posting things online somewhere where people could apply and jump through some hoops and help us to weed through some of the applicants, and then, interview a bunch. And obviously we still go through having people take tests and interview process and all that. Maybe that'd be worth speaking to as well. But we've had a lot more success with that recruitment mode that Nate's talking about, with the asking our existing team members, hey, do you know anybody good and qualified for this kind of work that we need right now? That's where we really have had a ton of success. It was a lot more hit or miss when we were just posting the things online. So if that's where you've been doing things, you might think about a shift to this mentality. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you find the different seats that you need to be filled, and you look for the kind of traits that would, the person who would really thrive in that seat would carry. And when we hired Catherine Hirschberger, who's our now chief of staff and as a leader in our company, she was somebody who'd been a personal assistant to like a semi-celebrity, was kind of an entrepreneurial young lady at the time when we hired her, but didn't have any necessarily like skills in client care and management. But we put her in that seat, and she quickly showed us that she had the right kind of service orientation and people orientation to really bring this very needed ingredient to our agency. And if any of you have interacted with her, she will live and die by like serving our clients well, and like fights tooth and nail to make sure that every client gets carried across the finish line to where their goals are, and that we are really like making sure that we serve but we've had people in her seat who didn't really like people, who would get easily stressed by wanting to please hundreds of clients at a time, or didn't necessarily like bring to the table the mentality of growth and service and like emotional health that kind of Catherine had from the jump. So it was just traits that we saw in her, and we've helped her over the years build into this professional lady boss that she is now. And she now kind of like runs like pretty much everything behind the scenes for the business as chief of staff. We've also had a lot of mistakes. Like there's been times when I have been in recruitment mode and thought this person is amazing, and I've had this like halo bias, and I've got fixated on this one trait that I think they're amazing at, and think that that'll play into everything else. And Troy will tell you, I've had some swings and misses, and that's just part of the process. Like last time we calculated, we had hired and dealt with like 50 people. That was like 8 years ago. I think it's probably up to like almost 100 now. I don't know exactly, maybe not quite that much, but like we've had a lot of people in and out of the business, and we've now landed on a team that is just freaking singing.
Yeah, we don't lose many people anymore because of some of those cultural things we've leaned into, and trying to find that right kind of person that's going to be a fit for the culture, that's going to be a good team fit, that's going to care in the way that we care, the way the rest of us care. I think that has really contributed to, we really don't lose people very often. It's pretty rare. But I think it might be helpful to even talk about some of that, Nate, like, how do we weed through, and how do we filter for, in the hiring process, find that person recruited, like where do we go from there?
Let's get tactical. Yeah. So let's get tactical. So one of the things that we do is we first, even with his friends and like employee referrals or whatever it might be, one of the things that we do from the jump is give them very specific instructions when we are in the hiring process in the early stages. And we put a lot of weight on people's ability to actually follow the instructions that we put in whatever process it might be for the particular seat we're looking at. So if that means like send us a resume in a PDF format, and if they send it to us in a Word doc, it's a good indicator that they're not paying close attention to some of the details that we need people to pay attention to.
Not a deal breaker depending on the position, but it's just another piece of the data point.
Right. And then we put them through a few like evaluation tests. We've recently learned to lean into the Colby testing, which gives like work style scores on like follow through and quick start and implementation, and a variety of like work ethic type mentalities and like visionary kind of perspectives. There's a variety of kind of things that it tests for. So Colby, Kolbe Corporation, puts out like, it's like a $50 test. It's worth it to invest in that for your people. What else am I missing?
Well, there's a lot of tests out there, right? StrengthsFinder. I mean, there's a bunch, and different people like different elements of different tests. Part of what we've liked about the Colby is that it gives you an indication of how people's gifts might be a fit for each other. So it measures in these 5 different areas of how they show up at work, specifically like it's helpful to know what their personality is like. That can be a contributing factor and something you take into account for especially the role they're going to be in. But what we really want to know is, how do they show up at work? What are they good at, right? And so you're trying to get a feel for what are they going to do with work when we put it in their hands. And so it actually tests for things like, are they really good at starting things, but maybe not as good at finishing things? Well, if that's your personality, you probably, depending on the position, you probably don't want that person. Depending on the position, you may want somebody who's more higher on what they call follow through. And so maybe you're a great starter, but you need somebody to help you finish. That's probably going to be the person you're looking for that position. So just something we found, I think, just bigger picture, higher level, I think something we've just found over the years is just increase and lengthen that process of vetting people. You know, I think we're much more willing to just like try somebody out and
hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah, we found that running them through some tests, giving them some work to turn back to you. Like, you really can never tell. You can have all the impressions that you think you have, and you can have all this confidence about what this person's going to be like. Maybe they remind you of someone else that worked well in a position similar to that. And you put work in front of them, and it does not turn out the way that you thought it was going to turn out. And it's just, we're often reminded, I often try to remind myself that, like, you never really know how someone is going to do until you put actual work in their hands. And so as close as you can get to that in the interview process, the better. So actually giving them something.
Hold on just a sec, Troy. Hold that thought real quick.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. I'll take a quick break. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think I was just saying, testing, giving them something to turn back to you of some kind, like give them an assignment and have them turn it back to you, something that's congruent with the kind of work that they would be doing in the position that you're looking to fill or that you think they might be a fit for. Increasing the number of interviews. Don't just go with the first impression. Sometimes there's things you don't pick up until a second or third conversation. If you've got other team members, have them be a part of that. Let them get an impression. Maybe have them do the first interview or two before the person actually talks with you at all, depending on if you've got that team member in place who could do something like that. Just anything you can do. Pay attention to, like Nate was saying, the emails that they send you, anything that they turn back to you in any form. Notice how detail oriented the resume is. If you're looking for somebody that is, proofing returns or doing some kind of like highly detailed work, like you want somebody who is not going to have a lot of typos in their emails. If you're looking for somebody who and not going to have any big missed things or big typos in their resume, right? Where they should know that really matters. If you're looking for somebody who's going to be client facing and maybe you're a receptionist or a scheduler or somebody who's going to be on the phone a lot or emailing a lot, like you want somebody who seems to like people and seems to be friendly and likable and affable. Maybe somebody who could do a skillful job of converting an inquiry into an appointment. So be thinking about like what it is you're looking to fill, and then what are the tiny little things you notice in the process of vetting them that might betray to you whether they would be a good fit for this position or not. And sometimes you might have a great person on your hands who's not a good fit for the position you're looking to fill, but maybe is worth fitting into the next position that you were thinking to fill because they're available now. Occasionally that does happen.
Two more things that I think you should talk about, Troy. First one is references, and the second one is 3-month trial, because I feel like those are both things that we've learned make a huge difference in this process.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we always, if we're serious about someone, one of the stages in the process is we always ask for references, and we always call the references. Sometimes that can just be a move to just see if they've got some references. We actually call the references. We actually try to get a hold of the references. And then when we talk to them, we try to not just have a cursory conversation with them, where the person's just prepped to say nice things about this person, because you actually can find out a lot of data in that conversation, if you can get them to open up and be honest a little bit. So we'll actually try to earn rapport. If I'm talking with a reference for a candidate, I'll actually try to ask them questions that can be maybe a little bit disarming, a little more open-ended. And then sometimes I'll try to get them to give me examples, which is maybe something we could talk about in the interview process as well. Yeah. But I'll try to get them to give me examples. I'll actually ask them like, hey, if like manager to manager, like if you were in my shoes, what would you want to know to manage this person well? What would you want to know that often will open up. What's that?
No, it's just carry on.
Yeah. I mean, that often will open up. They'll often kind of sense a connection of like, oh yeah, I could be in your shoes. I could be the one looking to hire this person. And it makes them reflect a little bit more about what was my experience with managing them. Like, well, they're really good at this, this, and this, but sometimes I would notice they would miss this. And so I just had to make sure that I communicated really well about it or whatever it is, right? Or they can tell you something about the person's learning style. That stuff can actually be helpful to you if you do wind up hiring the person, which a lot of times if we're calling it references, we're thinking we're probably going to hire the person. You can find out things that you can actually use then to manage them or pass on to their manager who will be managing them. so that you can manage them well and you can know what maybe their blind spots are. And it can also let you know about some red flags. So actually trying to find those disarming questions, those ways to build rapport, and actually you don't want to waste the reference's time. I try to keep those short, 10, 15 minutes, 20. I don't get ever gone to 20, but 10, 15 minutes max. Keep it short. But I actually do try to get to the heart of the matter and really try to find out what this person is and is not good at, because everybody's got their things they're good and not good at. So if the reference isn't giving you that stuff, you got to press.
And just even like the knowledge that you're checking the references can be a weeding factor for the candidate. There's some that don't have good references, don't have any references, and that's its own telltale sign. Another thing that I have done in the past that can be helpful is actually finding references that the person didn't actually provide, but finding out people that know the person and like finding second order references that aren't just spoon-fed, but know the person and operate from them. And actually that is often the most telltale. Because if that's a really good reference, if it's somebody that the person didn't tell me to talk to, but I have a mutual friend with the person, that makes that's very telling to me what that person reports of the traits from that person.
Yeah.
Talk about the 3-month trial that we've landed on.
Yeah, that's good. And let me just add one little tiny thing to that.
Sure.
Onto it, just that obviously checking social media. Like sometimes there's things that you wouldn't find out any other way. It seems obvious. Sometimes I forget it. Nate's usually really good about it, but like sometimes I'll remember to check it and it'll tip me off to things that I wouldn't have learned from any other source. So that can be helpful. It's not necessarily disqualifying things, but it can round out the picture.
Yeah, we had a guy that we hired, it was a pay-per-click guy, and man, we had a 3-month trial with this guy. And we did end up letting this person go. And there were some telltale signs looking back on the social media that we should have been a little bit more paying attention to.
Everything else seemed great. And so we wrote that stuff off. I mean, in retrospect,
we were wrong.
Yeah. So we do a 3-month trial. And so what we kind of, when we provide the job offer to the applicant, we will actually say, hey, and we explain this in the interview process, we're actually going to have a 3-month trial period where it's, we don't really use the word probationary, but that's essentially what it is. It's kind of a trial period where it's very at will and employment, and it is thereafter as well. But at any point during the 3-month period in particular, that if you decide that this isn't working out, it's not the right path for you, you can say goodbye. If at any point we decide the same, we can say goodbye. No hard feelings, no harm done, as best as possible. It's just it's kind of an agreement of like, hey, we're going to be kind of easy about if this doesn't work for the first 3 months. After that, we'll recommit if that makes sense. And then it's a different level of relationship. At that point, we are more of a commitment to each other. And we actually tell them there's going to be a 3-month review, a 3-month check-in is what we call it, where at the end of 3 months, we're going to especially assess like, hey, is this working out? And are we just stringing you along? And we actually are confident that it is going to work out. And so we actually, in the last couple of years, have let a few people go at the 3-month trial point because it just they clearly weren't the right kind of fit. They didn't have the kind of work ethic. They didn't care about the end result and the client as much as we do. They didn't care about getting their job done as much as we expect everybody to. Maybe they were being dishonest in some significant ways. If there's just something that's like a kind of a deal breaker and you find it in those first 3 months, it just gives you an easy out. Or if it's just going to be a struggle and you can just see that this person is kind of getting the job done, but they're never going to thrive here. And we need somebody thriving in this position. You're just not doing anybody any favors on your team. You're not even really doing them a favor to keep them in a position that's not really going to be good for them and probably isn't going to work out for them in the long run. So having that 3-month period kind of takes some of the pressure off for everybody. And it also allows it to be a little easier for them to say yes to something that, them knowing that it's a 3-month trial and that they're not like committing the rest of their lives either.
Yeah. And no, we don't want to, it's really important to build this sort of like subconscious database of information with people, right? Like it's really important to, during that 3 months, really be on high alert about the soft skills, the little things. It very much helps to have a vision and values that you can operate by, that you can look at, like how are people adhering to the way that we do things around here. And it's its own podcast, and we've actually had conversations about that in the past. So you could go back into the archives and look at the vision, values, and culture stuff that we've talked about in the past. So that's something that we really look at, is how well do people adhere to our vision and our values and our culture. Those are actually the most consequential components that we're looking at. Do they actually seek forgiveness instead of permission? Do they actually take some initiative to fix things and take the message to Garcia. And if you're familiar with that old story, you know, like there are people who will just get the job done, or are they constantly like passing the buck and asking the supervisor for them to do the work for them? These are little things that matter greatly in terms of the machinery of your operation. And if you've got somebody in your world who's constantly like kicking things up the chain and is not actually helping you, gotta let them go. And that 3-month window really provides freedom for that. And it's really important. You alluded to something earlier about hiring questions, Troy, and I know a lot to say about that. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I think, one of the
like interview questions.
Yeah, one of the things that's been most helpful that I've found in interviews is just asking questions that ask them to tell you a story where there's a concrete example of something they've encountered before. And so I have a number of questions that I'll just ask along those lines and I'll usually, I don't have like the exact same list of questions every time, but I'll think about what is the position we're hiring for, what kind of things they need to be good at, or if there's something I can't quite read on them personality wise, whether they would be a fit culturally, then I'll ask a question that's something along the lines of just asking them to tell me an example of a story, a time when they actually had a certain experience. And so it might be, tell me a time where you were in a position where you had too much work on your plate and too many deadlines to meet, and you knew you weren't going to be able to meet them all, and how you handled that situation. Mm-hmm. Or have you ever been in a position
that never happens in a business?
Right. Yeah. Or tell me a time where you had to work with someone that you had a hard time getting along with and what you did to handle that situation. So just like questions that kind of where you're actually asking them to tell you a story. It's much more difficult for someone to be deceptive or just give pat answers to a question like that when you're actually asking to tell a story on the spot. Mm-hmm. There may be have to tell. They have to actually come up with something from the memory bank and provide some detail that you can actually prod and try to get them to tell you more on, instead of just giving you a pat answer about the kind of person that they are and use the same cliche lines, get past some of those defenses. And it also just gives you some color as to what are the things they choose to tell you from that story. What do they choose to focus on? And when you push back on this or ask further on that, how do they respond to that? I just find that to be a way that really helps cut through the clutter when there's certain things I still need to get clear on in an interview process.
So we've gotten very tactical here, but I just want to circle back to the strategy. Remember, think about the place that you're at right now in your practice. Are you in the bills paid moment where you're just like really need to make sure that you've got the right service offering that creates the right amount of profit that can fund the next stage? And then the next stage is the right team. And that's really where we've been sitting today, is making sure that you've got those right team players to build with, to grow with, which is the third stage. And then you hit that growth. And then eventually you need to get out of the freaking way and let this practice run with less and less and less of you. We've gone through many iterations of Project Free Up Troy, Project Free Up Nate, Project Free Up Christian, Project Free Up Ben, Project Free Up Eugenia. We've built in our entire culture trying to build towards growth and scale, and all of our people are trying to kind of work themselves out of their role eventually so that we can build the kind of operation that we want, that brings joy and serves clients well. And so I think that's where we might leave it, Troy. I think this has been a very meaty conversation, if I do say so myself. And I do. But any final words from you before we sign off?
No, I think that's good. I think one other thing that maybe has floated through my mind throughout this that isn't a terrible place to be winding down towards is just that we've referenced a lot like work ethic, right? And how much people care, and actually like being driven versus being entitled. And I guess I would just say that something that Nate and I've really stumbled on over the years is that it is much easier to teach someone who is self-motivated, hard-working, driven, maybe too much, maybe workaholic, maybe a perfectionist, push them to dial it down, push them to not care quite so much, push them to relax a little bit, and take good care of themselves. They're going to keep working hard. You're not going to have an issue with that if that's their wiring. If you can identify that in the hiring and interviewing process and screening process, that is much easier than to try to get someone who is not very motivated to work harder. We've had almost no success with that. It's very, very difficult. But if you find somebody who seems like they're really driven, that's gold. And it's worth trying to find a way to fit them into your organization and then helping them to be healthy, even as they get a ton of work done for you.
This is awesome. You're awesome, Troy. This is great. Thank you. And we'll leave it there. And maybe if our team tells us that we should have more conversations around this, we might, but I think this is a lot to chew on, and we'll put some more resources in the show notes. So good job, Troy. Thanks, guys. All right. Bye.